Hello and welcome back to yet another GCSE revision lesson. Now, what I want to do within this lesson is to go over language paper 2, question number 2. And more specifically, I want to show you the difference between a grade 3 response for this kind of question, which obviously would not really pass, versus a grade 9 model response for this question, so that as you are looking at these two responses, you can really ask yourself, when you reflect on your practice for this part of language paper 2, is my writing closer to the grade 3 response or is it closer to the grade 9 response? One of the reasons why I really also love going over grade 9 responses is even if, and I always tell this to my students every single week during my language paper 1 and paper 2 GCSE masterclasses, I always tell my students, guys, I'm going over grade 9 responses. You don't have to aim for a grade 9, but the best way to learn how to improve is to see a really great example of a response that has gotten 4 marks and then take what works for you and then adjust it and adapt it to the grade that you're working towards. For example, if it's a 4, if it's a 5, 6 or 7 or even an 8, you can still borrow elements from a winning essay. And that's what I'd like to really encourage you to think about when you're looking at this grade 9 response that I'm going to be looking at. So this is a grade 9 student response versus a grade 3 style of response that barely gets a pass. Borrow what you like from the grade 9 response, especially if you're really struggling to climb out of grade 1, 2 and 3 and you're like, oh my gosh, I keep on getting a 3, I keep on getting a 2, I keep on getting a 1. In terms of my feedback from my teachers, I'm going to show you how you can climb out of that and start working your way through grade 4, grade 5, and depending of course on what you're aiming for, you can get that 6, 7, 8 and 9 once you start looking at what goes into the components of a winning essay. Now, remember that when it comes to language paper 2, AQA did announce some changes to the wording of some of the questions. And of course, question number 2 in language paper 2 was one of the questions that's changed. Now students are always going to be asked what they can infer when they're looking at the two sources that they're asked to look at. So the modern non-fiction text in source A that they get versus the Victorian non-fiction text that they get in source B. And of course, they are expected to talk about similarities and differences when they are inferring. Now, one of the things that I'm aware is an issue because the AQA language paper 1 and paper 2 structure did change is there's not very many sample papers that you can use when practicing and preparing for language paper 2. So what I did is I spent around 3 months basically creating a load of language paper 1 past paper questions and AQA style past paper questions and language paper 2 AQA style past paper questions in the new format that you can download, starting with this. And this, by the way, is available to download for free. Just simply go into First Rate Tutors Substack, which is just like an online blog. I always post free model answers and also free papers, especially the new 2026 papers on that platform. Just simply click the link either in the description or just go to the community post where I always post when I've posted a free B and a free exam paper. Now you will need to download this exam paper because it gives you context as to now the question I'm going to go over for language paper 2. Just for some context, the 2 extracts are non-fiction extracts related to the idea of shipwrecks. And source A, the modern text, is basically an instruction manual of sorts taken from a blog. And it basically tells people who read it and its readers how to react in the event of a shipwreck. While source B, the Victorian text in this paper, is taken from an eyewitness account of somebody who saw people on a shipwreck and then 2 people unfortunately drowned. So this is just an account and a extract taken from this account describing this tragic incident, okay? So as I said, what I'm now going to go over is what a grade 3 response looks like for this style of question, okay? And then in contrast, I'm going to present you a grade 9 response for the same question so that you can see, okay, when I reflect on what I've written in my current practice that I'm doing for language paper 2, or indeed in my past practice for paper 2, what quality is my essay closer to, right? Am I closer to the grade 3 or the grade 9? And if it's grade 3, obviously you have some work to do. So I'm going to get into it. Let's start with the grade 3 response. And I'm going to actually first read the question that came up. Okay, so question 2 always asks, look at source A and source B. And in this particular paper, which is, as I said, if you want to read it and even use it for your own practice, it's literally available to download for free. I've posted the link so you can download it off Substack in case you also just want to use it for your practice. This question says, look at source A and source B. What can you infer about the differences in the purposes of both texts? Okay, this question will always ask you to either talk about similarities or differences and what you can infer. Okay, so I'm going to begin by going over the grade 3 response, okay, and how a structure, or rather a paragraph that's written, which is a little bit weak, looks like. And as I said, if you struggle with doing well on this question, ask yourself, am I also making the same mistakes as this student in this response? Okay, so this is a grade 3 paragraph that is related to the question. Okay, as you can see here, I've color coded it. So I've started the point in blue and I've written the evidence in red. Okay, so that you can also see how this student includes the evidence in their responses. So this paragraph says, in source A and source B, the purpose is different. So they begin strong by mentioning the difference in purposes, which is one of the parts of the question that they're being asked. Then they say, source A tells us what to do when a ship sinks. It says we should be safe, calm down. So now they've gone into evidence from source A. And if we're in danger, stay controlled. Source B, so now they're shifting into source B. This is the first time they mention source B. Source B just talks about how a shipwreck where two people died, both sank. So they've added evidence from source A and source B. They didn't open the opening point. We're talking about both sources. They only talked about source A, then added evidence from both. Then they carry on with another point. Also, source A tells readers to get on a lifeboat, but source B says the boat disaster was scary. Now, one of the reasons why this paragraph and this response probably wouldn't really get a pass is, number one, they don't really seamlessly move that much, especially in the beginning, between both sources. Remember that in question 2, which is your first comparison question, you also, in the structure of your writing, need to show that you're seamlessly moving between the two sources. You are consistently comparing. But also, there's another aspect that has really limited their marks that they can potentially get. And to be honest, it's super obvious. Hopefully you can see that in terms of how much is written, this grade 3 response is very brief, in contrast to just the amount that a student who's getting a grade 9 also will be writing. Remember, guys, that one of the unfair advantages that students who get 6s, 7s, 8s, and 9s do have is they simply just write more. And writing more comes with practice. It's not a gift and a talent that somebody is born with. This comes with practice, okay? So now I'm going to go over the grade 9 response. And of course, if you're looking at this and you're like, oh my gosh, okay, this is helpful, but how can I apply this in practice? How does this look like when I look at other questions? I have more questions, Barbara. Can I ask you some questions? So simply join in my Language Paper 2 masterclass, okay? So every single Sunday at 5 to 6 p.m, I always go over Language Paper 1 and Language Paper 2 in a live lesson. Lots of students have joined in. They've really benefited, and many of my students last year ended up getting 6s, 7s, 8s, and 9s in their final GCSE exam. So of course, if you have any questions, just simply join in that masterclass. Again, the link to joining that in is in the description. So now I'm going to go over the grade 9 response, okay, to the same question. What can you infer about the differences in the purposes of both texts? So as you can see here, I've color-coded the different steps that this student has taken. Blue for point, red for evidence, black for explanation, and then purple for link. So let's see how this is different to the grade 3 response. While source A is a blog, which we can infer, so already they're starting to mention the keyword infer, which we can infer aims to instruct us on how to respond to shipwrecks at sea. Source B appears to inform us as readers of an actual disaster at sea where 2 people lost their lives. Already in the opening point, unlike this grade 3 response, this student has started by using the keywords infer, and they're talking about the purposes of both texts. They even say one text is a blog, for instance, but they also move seamlessly between source A and source B. Then they carry on in their evidence. In source A, the writer uses an informative tone to highlight that evidence, screaming and running in emergencies at sea will get us killed. Okay, so they've really nicely embedded the quotation. Again, unlike this student who they just throw in the quotation in the paragraph and just kind of move on, right? Try to work on also embedding quotations. That's the first source A quotation, but then they carry on. Yet, interestingly, source B uses a sympathetic tone to highlight how A, evidence, tender-hearted veteran tried to save a man in the ocean but died in the process. Look at the fact that, especially if structuring your paragraphs is an issue that you have, look at the fact that in this student response, there's always constant comparison and constant reference to both source A and source B and the differences. In the opening point, then the evidence. Now have a look at the explanation. Do they unpack this rather than go on to yet another point, right? Remember that now what they're doing in the explanation is rather than leaving this as a shallow point, they're going into more detail, okay? That's now a little bit of analysis. This is now where students start really pulling away and getting those higher marks. And this is what differentiates the students who end up getting 6s, 7s, 8s, and 9s versus those that really struggle with 1, 2, and 3, okay? So now this is the explanation. We can understand and infer that source A uses a series of statements and instructions to educate us on how to react if there is a shipwreck disaster, yet source B wants us as readers to feel empathy as we're informed about the tragic outcome of a shipwreck. So now here, this is unpacking these two quotations and connecting it consistently back to the question. Also, hopefully, you may have noticed lots of really good comparative terms, words like whilst, things like even interestingly, what can we see, right? This now starts adding flair in your writing if you include that when you're writing comparatively. Now, here's the link back to the question, okay? So they then finish off by saying, thus, we can evidently infer source A is instructive when advising readers how to react to disasters on board a ship, yet source B seems to be an account of a tragic event where 2 men died due to a shipwreck. Now, obviously, this response is much more wordy. Remember that the more you can write in the same amount of time is the more you climb up in marks. And this is one of the things that you really need to work on as a skill throughout year 9, year 10, year 11, depending on what year you're in when you're watching this video. And the other aspect that I really want to highlight is, in addition to obviously referring back to we can infer keywords in the question, you also need to make sure you're traveling between both sources consistently. Use a robust structure. I really like a pill paragraph structure. Just because it's simple doesn't mean it's easy, but also make sure you use analytical terms like interestingly, we can understand, right? All of this stuff really starts to impress your teacher and ultimately your examiner when they're marking and reviewing your work. And as I said, if you want just a bit more context in connection to this paper, it is free and available to download. Just simply go on Substack and download it there for free. Just find any of the posts that I've put up which say freebie, okay? And as I mentioned, if you want a little bit more support, I'm going to be going over this every single week in my language paper 1 and paper 2 GCSE masterclasses. We're all on the road to getting 6s, 7s, 8s and 9s in the final GCSE exams. So I hope you can join us and thanks so much for watching.